whether it's government, media, or other institutions where they have power over the population. And no other place is this more on display than at my favorite ski resort town that I haven't been to, Davos, Switzerland. So I think it's time for Davos Watch. Let's hit that bumper music if you have it ready. All right, welcome to episode 12 of Davos Watch, where we keep an eye on the global elites from Davos to the UN and all the other advocates of global fascism and totalitarian technocracy. This week, I want to talk about Davos. That is right, the big show. Davos 2024 wrapped up this past Friday. And to put us in the Davos man mindset, I have a video here prepared for you that I think will get your head in the right headspace to kind of absorb all of these potential machinations of the global elite. So let's go ahead and play this video. Set the mood. This is my favorite part.
I love the look on their faces.
Hey, what do you get away from me?
I want to say Gesundheit after this.
Oh my god. Look at these guys lean in.
For all the audio only listeners, what is happening here is someone representing some tribe of some indigenous people somewhere doing some sort of opening ceremony prayer type thing and walking one by one to each of the panelists that are on stage for this Davos panel and basically blowing in their faces one after the other. And, I want to get my goal in life is to get to a point where I'm influential enough where I could be at a conference like this and have a tribal woman spit in my face. I think that's a goal that we should all try to attain.
Well, we went from 6 feet of separation and everybody has to double mask to coughing in each other's faces at a Davos Watch in record time, man.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt.
Good. Was this before or after the evangelical Baptist minister got up there and
yeah, no, that's not allowed. That's not.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
That's not allowed. Yeah.
I didn't know that. It's whatever the hell this was, I guess, is the only religion allowed at Davos.
So I want to spend the episode running through some of my main takeaways from the conference, and this video that we just played kind of ties into my first point. So there was an article published by National Review that started off by highlighting this interaction at Davos. The point of the article was basically to say that Davos is nothing but cringe wannabe central planners virtue signaling for a week while not actually wielding all that much power over the lives and decisions made around the world. The article is titled Davos is Cringe. And while I agree with certain aspects of that article, I disagree with kind of their main point. So the article then quotes World Bank President Ajay Banga, who during one of his panels he was on started talking about how we must not even allow developing countries to use reliable energy, but instead allow them to grow with the use of wind and solar power. So Ajay Banga says, quote, I actually believe that if you open the taps on natural gas everywhere, then you won't be able to close it again. He says, I think the world has come to this conclusion, political leaders and everyone else, that you cannot say that it's my turn. Let me grow with energy emissions heavy growth. And first off, I feel like this is like a total change of position of the global elite types. Usually, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jim, but I always thought like in the Paris Climate Treaty or different agreements like that, that developing countries were always kind of given a pass. They'll say, yeah, don't worry about curbing your emissions until 2030 or something like that. Like, isn't that the deal that China got? But now we've got the World Bank president on there saying like, nope, wind and solar or nothing. So I thought that was pretty crazy. But anyways, the article in National Review then goes on to point out that why would developing countries agree to this? So they can get invited to the next Davos? Nah, surely they'll continue to use reliable energy. And this is where I disagree. The World Bank slushes around a whole lot of money. They're funding projects around the world to the tune of tens of billions of dollars a year. And to get your hands on some of that money in forms of grants or loans, you bet some countries around the world are going to be clamoring to chase some of these green energy schemes. And the point of the president of the World Bank speaking at Davos is partially to increase their power and resources, to make them even more influential. And, we know from everything that we've covered over the past couple of years, about the Great Reset, ESG, that the World Economic Forum and the parties that meet at Davos wield enormous power and influence. So my first takeaway is that some seem to like to dismiss Davos and just kind of ridicule the people there, which I think is fair. We just watched that video, ridicule away. But I think we should also take them very seriously in the plans that they put forward and the potential power that they wield. So that's my first takeaway. The second bit, I'm just going to run through all of this and I'll open it up to your guys' comments and all of that. My second takeaway, apparently climate change has taken a back seat to other matters. So another article that I'd had here, and if I can find it, Andy, I'll give it to you. But it basically says that this is from a New York Times, and it suggests that climate has taken a back seat to other issues at Davos. And the author of the article is David Gellis. He moderated two of the panels at Davos. So he's the one that's making this claim. He talks about how Davos seemed to de-emphasize the topic of climate, quoting one activist complaining, quote, "They are not talking about climate, about biodiversity, about the crisis at all. It's not acceptable." Gellis then writes about an interaction that he had with Andres Galuski, a chief executive of a major renewable energy company. Galuski apparently said, quote, "I think there's a little bit of a sort of climate catastrophe fatigue. Human beings aren't well adapted to reacting to long-term changes," Galuski said. "Our brains are basically the same as Paleolithic hunters. It's like throw spear, run from tiger. We're not good at thinking 3 years from now that my cave might collapse." And I just thought, what a what a great way to describe the minds of people. They're just cave dwellers, seemingly.
I think I prefer being called sheep.
Yeah, right. We're just downward sliding on the analogies here. Now, of course, there was plenty of climate talk. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry was out there in full force during 3 panels where he hit all the high notes when it came to climate alarmism. Dangerously close to a tipping point, zero emissions by 2050, business as usual is no longer an option, all the greatest hits. John Kerry just outlining how much money is needed, trillions of dollars a year to fight climate change. And there was, 200 speeches and panels. So, of course, a handful of them were about climate. But, and this is my next takeaway, is that it was overshadowed. Climate definitely was overshadowed by the topic of mis and disinformation. This was the topic that definitely took center stage over the course of the week. This kind of main topic mirrors the attention that they paid to this topic of mis and disinformation in their recently released Global Risks Report, where they put that as the top risk over the next couple of years. And they constantly discuss this in the context of 3 billion people, or half the world's population, is going to be voting in one election or another over the next 12 to 18 months. And they had panels dedicated to talking about deep fakes and AI-generated audio and their ability to alter elections and manipulate people. And we've discussed that on this podcast before. Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, discussed these issues and how it relates to the upcoming elections and how it can throw elections if certain misinformation is spread and all of that. And she discussed the progress that she's made so far, that the European Union has made so far in these efforts. And then another interesting bit was a discussion between Klaus Schwab and Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft, where Klaus Schwab asked whether or not he thinks that Nadella believes that there's need for global regulations when it comes to artificial intelligence and some of these other matters, where Satya Nadella said, yeah, I think that is something that we're going to need to do. And then Klaus Schwab responded saying, like, yeah, I think, everyone seems to be on board with this, including China. They signaled their willingness to be a part of this global regulating regime when it comes to AI. So doesn't that just fill you all with such great excitement and, just looking forward to what's coming down the road, where China is going to be helping craft the regulations for artificial intelligence? That should make you feel very optimistic about our future. And then speaking of China, and this is kind of my last takeaway before I open it up to all of you guys, China was seemingly using Davos this year to court Western elites, and to a maybe equal degree vice versa. So China is usually welcomed to these sorts of international conferences with open arms, and this year was no different. But because of economic headwinds that China is facing, it seemed like China was playing a little nicer than usual. So there was one article that I was looking at, I think it was a CNBC article, and it was talking about how the delegation, China's delegation to Davos, was the largest that it's been in about 7 years. 80 people representing China going to Davos this year. And it all had this context of that China is not doing very well. Their stock market's starting to fall. People are pulling out major investments to the tunes of tens of billions of dollars. And then you have Chinese Premier Li Zhuang. Don't know how to pronounce that, but supposedly he's like second in command when it comes to the kind of the ruling powers in China. He had his own speech. It was a conversation with him, and where his main point was basically talking about how, yeah, we need to pursue cooperation with each other. And the idea that investing in China is an opportunity, not a risk. So you find a bunch of examples of people in multiple panels talking about how China's lead the way when it comes to climate change. And, oh, yeah, they're great because they want to get on board with global regulations for AI. And it just seemed like China was really trying to play nice at this conference. And like I said, vice versa. So those were my main takeaways after sifting through as many of these panels as we could get through. Justin, your interview that you did with Ali Stuckey today that you mentioned earlier was about this issue. Was there any other things that you wanted to add on to this, or any other takeaways that I neglected to talk about?
I think that one of the things that was, I think you did a good job summarizing that. I think that one of the things that has been missed by a lot of people is that there was a speech done by the head of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. And in the speech, he references all sorts of problems and issues and concerns like climate change and whatever, and suggests that, the only way we can solve this is with greater collaboration among multilateral institutions and influential groups and blah, 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 blah. And that's all Antonio Guterres' speak for we need to give the UN more power. And that's not me assuming that, sort of imposing that on him. Just prior to him getting up on the stage, the president of the World Economic Forum, a guy named Borge Brende, talked about how excited everybody at the World Economic Forum was for the United Nations upcoming meeting of the heads of state that's going to happen in September, an event called Summit for the Future, where they've already decided, have a pact for the future, which is going to be a new international agreement signed by heads of state that's going to include a whole slew of different proposals for basically enhancing the power of the United Nations and other multilateral institutions, including things like a global misinformation, disinformation board governing standards on the internet, for example, an emergency platform for the United Nations that gives them power, the head of the United Nations, unprecedented levels of power in the event of a future emergency, which he gets to declare himself and then continue to redeclare every time the period of time runs up, and on and on and on, a whole bunch of other things.
He also gets the title of Caesar when he does that.
Yeah, and Borge Brende, when he introduces it, says we're really excited and we're totally behind this our common agenda pact for the future thing that you got coming up. That's really exciting. And then the head of the United Nations gets up on the stage and talks about the importance of having to increase the power of the United Nations and multilateral institutions. And so, I mean, I understand you really got to like know what all this stuff is beforehand to decipher exactly what this means. But if you knew about those things and you heard that, you would say, oh my gosh, like that's bad. You know, I guess they're still going forward with that plan. And so although the details of that are still being finalized by various countries, their delegations at the United Nations, including the United States is involved in some of those talks. And the United States, by the way, has already said, it's one of its ambassadors to the United Nations, that they support our common agenda, including the emergency platform. That you know, we don't have all the details yet. It could change before the agreement is signed, but that's what's coming our way. And that was they're all super excited about that over at the World Economic Forum. And most people, I think, just kind of missed it because you got to know all this other stuff to know what that really is. But that's really a huge, huge thing. And the fact that that's still going on, and the fact that the World Economic Forum is 100% behind it, and the fact that the Biden administration is already committed to at least a fair amount of it, not a good sign whatsoever. This year is going to prove to be, for a variety of reasons, not just the election, but for a variety of reasons, this year, 2024, is going to prove to be one of truly a pivotal year in the future of freedom for Americans. A lot of very important things are happening this year. And some of that might get reversed if a new president comes in, but some of it might not. And of course, we don't know if Biden will win the election. So there's that as well. So all important stuff for people to pay attention to going forward.